A $42,000 houseboat changed hands at a marina outside Nashville on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. The buyer paid cash, signed a single-page bill of sale, and motored away, believing the transaction was complete. What the bill of sale did not mention was the slip lease, a separate contract held by the marina, running at between $400 and $700 per month, or the Liveaboard surcharge on top of that, or the requirement to carry a commercial-grade insurance policy that the slip management company happened to sell. Within 60 days, the buyer had committed to an additional $14,000 in annual obligations, none of which appeared on the document that changed hands. The $42,000 was not the purchase, it was the entry fee. And the entry fee, it turns out, is the smallest number in the story. The real cost accumulates in a category most buyers never calculate. Not the vessel, not the mooring, but the slow arithmetic of a floating structure depreciating against a rising cost base, financed by instruments designed for a category the banking system has never fully trusted. The asset loses value on a curve that accelerates with age. The costs do not. This is not one problem. It is a layered structure with at least 5 distinct moving parts, each engineered to extract money from someone who does not know what the adjacent party is earning on the transaction. The slip operator, the insurer, the lender, the surveyor, and the resale market are not separate phenomena. They are one system, and the question that governs everything that follows is this: of the money that moves through a houseboat transaction, who actually captures it? And is that person ever the one who thought they were buying freedom? That question cannot be answered yet. Before the ledger opens, there is something worth taking seriously. The idea of living on water is not a delusion. It is a specific, seductive proposition with a logic that survives serious scrutiny. There is a quality of light on water in the early morning, flat and silver, falling across a galley's small windows, that has no equivalent on land. The vocabulary is different. You do not have a driveway, you have a dock. Not a landlord, a harbour master, not a utility bill, a pump-out schedule. People who sell this life know the language well. They speak of self-sufficiency and tidal rhythms and the sound of rain on a steel roof as though these are things money cannot buy, and then, gently, they sell them. The asking price looks like liberation because it is priced well below any comparable square footage on land. A 200-square-foot floating studio at $45,000 is not a compromise. It is, in the framing offered, a philosophical statement about the difference between owning a place and owning a life. The boat itself is often genuinely beautiful. Wide, flat-decked pontoon hulls painted in muted blues and greens. Reclaimed wood on interior surfaces. A gas burner in a kitchen the size of a closet that somehow produces better meals than a full-sized kitchen ever did. A sleeping loft with a porthole instead of a window. The salesperson, sometimes a broker, sometimes the seller themselves, speaks in the register of experience rather than transaction. They do not say this vessel has a compromised hull liner. They say she's got character. The desire is real. The numbers are as promised for later. Now, the ledger. A houseboat listed under $50,000 in good structural condition will carry annual maintenance costs running between 10 and 15% of its purchase price, simply because marine materials, fiberglass, aluminum, treated timber, marine-grade electrical systems, degrade faster than their land equivalents and require specialist labor to repair. On a $45,000 vessel, 10% is $4,500 per year. That is not a bad year. That is the expected year on a vessel that is being properly maintained. Deferred maintenance does not disappear. It compounds, and marine surveyors, whose job is to price exactly this, document the compounding at intervals that should alarm any buyer who has read the survey carefully. The second benchmark is mooring. Slip costs across liveaboard permitting marinas in the continental United States run between $350 and $900 per month, depending on location, vessel length, and whether the marina classifies the occupant as a resident, a classification that triggers its own fee tier in many facilities. Using a mid-range figure of $550 per month produces $6,600 per year. That number does not include liveaboard surcharges, which commonly add between 15 and 30% to the base slip rate because the marina carries additional liability for full-time occupants. Add 20% and the annual mooring cost approaches $8,000. On a $45,000 vessel, that is nearly 18% of the purchase price every year before the boat is used at all. The third benchmark is insurance. Marine liveaboard policies differ structurally from standard vessel coverage because the insurer is covering a primary residence, not a recreational craft. Annual premiums for a liveaboard houseboat in the $30,000 to $60,000 hull value range run between $1,500 and $3,500 annually, with the spread determined largely by hull age and construction material. Older steel hulls and aging fiberglass both carry surcharges that push premiums toward the top of that range. On a $45,000 boat, a mid-range premium of $2,400 represents another 5+% of purchase price per year. Bundled, maintenance, mooring, and insurance together produce an annual carrying cost of between $14,000 and $22,000 on a vessel that cost $45,000 to purchase. The vessel will be paid for in carrying costs alone in roughly 2 to 3 years. The vessel will not, however, be worth what it cost. Marine craft depreciate on a curve that steepens after the first decade of use, and a steel or fiberglass houseboat built in the 1980s or 1990s, which describes a significant share of the sub-$50,000 inventory, may carry a survey value meaningfully below its asking price by the time a buyer thinks to commission one. These are not worst-case numbers. They are the arithmetic of an ordinary year on an ordinary vessel run by someone who is not negligent. What is advertised is freedom from a mortgage. What is owed is a mortgage's annual cost without the mortgage's equity. The first escape route is the cash purchase with no slip. The argument runs as follows: buy the boat outright, anchor in a permitted anchorage, use the dinghy to reach shore, and eliminate the single largest recurring cost, the slip, entirely. The logic is coherent and the savings are real in the short term. Mooring balls in municipal anchorages run between $0 and $200 per month where they are permitted, and some anchorages have historically tolerated liveaboards in legal grey areas that kept enforcement costs low for local authorities. The threshold conditions under which this fails are mechanical and administrative rather than philosophical. Most municipalities with desirable anchorages have moved or are moving toward time-limited stays, commonly a 72-hour or 14-day maximum, specifically because the liveaboard population, once established, creates infrastructure demands the Harbour Authority has not budgeted for. Pump-out access, trash disposal, mail delivery, and the political visibility of a floating encampment near real estate that is rising in value have, in location after location, produced enforcement where none previously existed. The anchorage that was free in a given year may be actively patrolled 2 years later. The liveaboard without a slip has no contractual right to remain. Beyond the regulatory exposure, the vessel itself suffers from the absence of shore power. Running a generator for electricity costs between $500 and $1,200 per year in fuel on modest consumption. That is before accounting for generator maintenance, which on a marine unit running full-time adds another several $100s annually. The calculation that eliminated the slip replaces it with a different line item and adds a maintenance obligation the slip would have absorbed. The arithmetic closes. This kind of analysis, mechanism by mechanism, number by number, is published regularly on this channel, and it is worth following for anyone who finds arithmetic more useful than a sales pitch. The argument continues. The second escape route is the fixer-upper, bought below market because it needs work, with the buyer intending to do that work themselves. A vessel listed at $22,000 with known systems failures, a compromised electrical panel, a failing holding tank, delaminating deck. Looks to a buyer with construction skills like a vessel worth $40,000 that can be acquired for half price. The gap between asking price and survey value represents, in this framing, an opportunity. What this framing omits is the cost structure of marine repair, which differs from terrestrial construction in two material ways. First, marine materials carry price premiums of between 30 and 80% over their land equivalents because supply chains are thinner, tolerances are tighter, and the consequences of failure are more severe. A failed holding tank is not a plumbing inconvenience, it is an environmental liability with regulatory consequences. Second, the labor required to access marine systems is disproportionate to the scale of the repair. Replacing a through-hull fitting requires hauling the vessel, which at most boatyards costs between $15 and $30 per foot per day, plus the haul-out fee itself before a single tool is touched. A $22,000 project vessel will, under almost any realistic repair schedule, consume its apparent discount before it reaches survey-ready condition. When it does, the buyer owns a vessel worth what it cost in good condition, not a profit, but a recapture of the original price, purchased with labor that had an opportunity cost of its own. What looks like leverage is the same equation, entered from a different door. The third escape route is financing, and it is the most structurally illuminating of the three, because the instrument reveals exactly how the banking system categorizes this asset class. Houseboats do not qualify for standard residential mortgage products in most cases because they are not real property. They are vessels. And vessels are titled through state boating authorities or the U.S. Coast Guard rather than through county deed registries. This means the financing instrument is either a marine loan or a personal loan, and the distinction matters enormously. Marine loans for Liveaboard vessels carry interest rates that commonly run between 2 and 5 percentage points above conventional residential mortgage rates, reflecting the lender's accurate assessment that the collateral depreciates, cannot be easily seized, and has a resale market that is narrower and less liquid than the residential housing market. On a $45,000 vessel financed at a rate 3 points above the prevailing residential mortgage benchmark, the additional interest cost over a 10-year term runs between $6,000 and $9,000. Roughly 15 to 20% of the purchase price, paid entirely to the cost of capital rather than to the asset. Personal loans, which some buyers use because they cannot qualify for marine financing, carry rates and terms that produce even wider spreads. The lender captures this premium not because the borrower is a poor credit risk, many are not, but because the asset class itself is categorized as elevated risk regardless of the borrower's profile. Now, the three profiles converge. The financed buyer pays the vessel's cost plus the lender's premium, then carries the annual costs on top, arriving at a 5-year total on a $45,000 vessel that may reach $80,000 to $90,000, including mooring, maintenance, insurance, and financing. The fixer-upper buyer eliminates the discount through repair costs and arrives at a similar vessel, carrying similar annual costs, having also spent the gap. The cash buyer eliminates financing costs and sits, apparently immune, until the annual carrying costs, mooring, maintenance, Insurance accumulate to the vessel's purchase price in 3 to 4 years, while the vessel's own value descends the depreciation curve. The specifics of each path differ. The destination does not. Who gets paid, and in what order? The slip operator is paid first, every month, with contractual priority. The insurer is paid annually on a fixed schedule, regardless of whether the vessel moves. The surveyor is paid at the point of transaction and at every refinancing or insurance renewal. The marine mechanic and material supplier are paid as the vessel ages, on a schedule dictated by the physics of saltwater and freshwater corrosion rather than by the owner's preference. The lender, where present, is paid in a stream that runs parallel to all of the above. The owner absorbs every cost that falls between the scheduled obligations. The failed bilge pump at midnight, the engine that will not start in February, the haul-out that cannot be deferred. The pattern is not accidental. It is the product of contracts and incentives that operate in plain sight, structured by parties who understood the arithmetic before the transaction began. A houseboat under $50,000 is not a home purchased below market. It is an access fee to a cost structure that was already in motion before the listing was posted. Clarity about what a thing actually is costs nothing to acquire and everything to ignore. You now know where the map leads.